Hi, you're in class with Dr. T. Hi guys, today I want to talk about the denial of polyculturalism in the making of tango, samba, and tap dancing. Tango, samba, and tap dancing are all popular parts of popular culture, one from Argentina, one from Brazil, and tap dancing started in the United States. But first, let's talk about the meaning and definition of polyculturalism. Polyculturalism is the concept that cultures are inherently interconnected and continuously influenced by one another. It emphasizes the idea that no culture exists in isolation. Let me repeat that. It emphasizes the idea that no culture exists in isolation, but is instead a product of various cultural exchanges and interactions over time. Polyculturalism acknowledges the fluidity and hybridity of cultural practices, beliefs, and expressions, highlighting the mutual influences and contributions among different cultures, right? And I just want to repeat, it emphasizes the idea that no culture exists in isolation, but is instead a product of various cultural exchanges. Okay, so we have the definition of polyculturalism. So let's talk about the polycultural origins of tango, samba, and tap dancing. Tango, in the late 19th century in Buenos Aires and Montevideo, drew from African, indigenous, and European influences. And the European influences were mainly of what is today Italy, so Italian, and what is today Spain, so Spanish. It was a melting pot of different musical traditions and dances that evolved in the marginalized communities of these port cities, right? Port cities. Port cities are always places where different groups of people gather together, and usually these are hubs of cultural exchange. Tango developed in the working class neighborhoods, often in brothels and bars, frequented by immigrants, freed slaves, and local marginalized groups. The dance and music reflected the diverse cultural backgrounds and social struggles of these communities. As tango gained popularity, it underwent a process of whitening to become more acceptable to the middle and upper classes and to international audiences. This involved sanitizing the dance, altering its music to be more in line with European taste, and presenting it in more quote unquote refined settings. The raw, sensual, and multicultural aspect of tango were downplayed or erased to fit the cultural norms of the dominant society. We see something similar in Brazil with the origins of samba. Samba originated from the African rhythms and dances brought to Brazil by enslaved Africans, combined with Portuguese and indigenous influences. It was a product of the cultural exchanges in the Afro-Brazilian communities of Rio de Janeiro's quote-unquote favelas. Samba developed in the impoverished neighborhoods where Afro-Brazilians predominantly lived. These areas were vibrant cultural hubs where people of African, indigenous, and also European and mixed descent shared and fused their musical and dance traditions. To integrate samba into mainstream Brazilian culture, its African elements were downplayed and European musical structures were emphasized. The Brazilian government and cultural institutions promoted a more quote unquote acceptable version, samba, under the government of Getúlio Vargas. His administration made it more suitable for middle and upper class audiences and for international consumption. This process involved changes in instrumentation, rhythm, and performance style. Also helped to promote it on the radio. That is Vargas. He helped to promote it on the radio. In addition, multinational corporations helped in making samba more diluted, promoting European performers like Carmen Miranda, for example, who became the international face of Brazilian music, but also of samba.
Thank you, man. I'll be thinking of you. Those bra break the moonlit mix. Carry on, MacDougall. Quick!
Finally, I'd like to talk a little bit about tap dancing, which of course origins comes from the United States. Well, tap dancing emerged in the United States as a blend of African rhythmic dance styles and Irish step dancing, with influences from English clog dancing. It developed in urban areas where African Americans and Irish immigrants lived in close proximity. One of the most famous neighborhoods being Five Points in New York City, Manhattan. Tap dancing originated in these working class neighborhoods. Also in Philadelphia and Boston, you had examples of this. But tap dancing originated in these working class neighborhoods, particularly in the context of what became minstrel shows and vaudeville, which were popular forms of entertainment, particularly among the more marginalized and lower class communities. African American dancers incorporated their rhythmic footwork with the Irish jig and other European dance forms, creating a unique and dynamic art form. As tap dancing gained popularity, white performers and producers began to dominate the scene. The dance was stripped of its original cultural context with an emphasis on formalized, less improvisational styles to appeal to a broader, predominantly quote-unquote white audience. In the 19th century, many African Americans were mocked and demonized as culturally and intellectually inferior, as whites dressed in blackface, using African-derived music and dance, right? So many Euro-Americans began a practice of blackface while simultaneously using the music and dance of Afro-descendant people. Later, Hollywood films and Broadway production shows showcased a sanitized version of tap dancing, often erasing its African American and multicultural roots, presenting it as a white art form. The early multicultural history of tango was often overshadowed by its later more refined European versions. This erasure served to make tango more palatable in elite audiences and international consumption. This was the case with samba and tap dancing as well. The version of samba that gained national and international popularity was a sanitized, whitened version, which masked its roots in the Afro-Brazilian communities. The history of tap dancing often highlights its development in the context of vaudeville and Hollywood, downplaying the significant contributions of African American dancers in the art form's multicultural origins. This erasure helped to make tap dancing more acceptable to white audiences and more marketable in the mainstream entertainment. The whitening of tango, samba, and dancing was driven by social, political, and economic motives to make these art forms more acceptable to mainstream, predominantly white audiences. This process involved sanitizing and modifying the original multicultural elements to align with dominant cultural norms and aesthetics. The whitening of these art forms facilitated their acceptance by middle and upper class audiences, both domestically and internationally, by aligning more closely with European or mainstream American tastes. These dances gained broader appeal and commercial success. The transformation of these art forms was also economically motivated by making them more marketable to a wider audience. Performers, producers, and cultural institutions could capitalize on their popularity, leading to greater financial returns. In some cases, the whitening of these art forms was influenced by political agendas, very specific political agendas. For example, the promotion of a sanitized version of Samba was part of Brazil's effort to forge a national identity that could be addressed by all social classes and presented to the world. Tango was used as a way of creating a national identity as well in Argentina, but also as a way of the of emphasizing its European roots by denying that tango had anything to do with an African past or with Afro-descendant people. Moreover, that it was actually an art form from the gutter, that is, from lower and more marginalized communities. So in conclusion, the transformations highlight the broader social, political, and economic forces at play in the cultural landscape, underscoring the limits of cultural purity and the complex dynamics of cultural adaptation and acceptance. The original multicultural nature of tango, samba, and tap dancing made them rich and dynamic art forms. They were rich and dynamic as these multicultural, or what I have said, polycultural, that these cultures emerge from different cultures coming together. But the process of whitening served to erase their diverse roots, to make them more bourgeois in nature. We also must remember in the late 19th century was the time of empire and colonialism through the world, and racial hierarchies were order of the day. The 20th century, we would see something called eugenics. The ideas of racial hierarchies have been transformed into ideas of inferior and superior races that were supposedly proven by bogus and pseudoscience. Those ideas had a tremendous impact in how cultural production would be organized. In order for cultural art forms to be celebrated, they had to go through a process of whitening. This unfortunate circumstance led to a denial of the glorious history that shows the beauty of diversity and when cultures are freely able to create in a harmonious way. Thank you.